I'm not sure what it is about forests that make them so creepy, especially when there's been all sorts of mysterious disappearances or killings. There's this one forest in India called the Satyamangalam forest. This forest is located deep within the state of Tamil Nadu, tucked away between the Western Ghats mountain range. This forest has a lot of tall trees and thick foliage. It's the kind of forest that would definitely make you feel isolated and alone, even more so if you were to get lost there. And unfortunately, a lot of people have gotten lost there over the years. Before we continue, I'd like to thank our sponsor. Back to the video. Back in the 1980s and 90s, the Satyamangalam forest was pretty much infamous throughout the whole country because it was the go-to hiding spot of one of India's most notorious bandits named Veer. He basically used the forest as his home base as he planned and executed his attacks. He robbed banks and smuggled sandalwood. At one point, the Indian government even offered him a noble's title if he laid down his weapons. But sadly, things didn't end peacefully. In 2004, Veerappan was killed in a shootout with the Tamil Nadu Special Police Task Force. But since then, a much more sinister presence has emerged in the forest. The locals refer to it as the ghost of the forest or the woman of the forest, and supposedly this presence lurks around the paths. Watching travelers, I'm going to tell you about a very specific path. They call it the Whispering Path. It is said to be located somewhere deep inside the forest, and apparently there is absolutely no cell phone reception in this area, and even the tall trees seem to avoid growing here. No birds ever chirp in this area, and the wind blows just enough to carry voices that are your own. As creepy as that sounds, let me tell you why this path exists in the first place. Back in 1999, there was a forest officer named Arjun. He was well liked by everyone. His colleagues liked him and the locals loved him. He always helped them out by getting rid of wild boars that sometimes raided their crops. But he also took it upon himself to chart a new path through an unpatrolled area of the forest. On March, he radioed in one last message to the station saying, "I think someone's following me, but there are no footprints." That same night, he disappeared without a trace. A search party was sent out the next morning, but they couldn't find anything. 3 days later, they found his torn uniform, soaked in blood and hanging from a tree. There were also some claw marks on the trunk of the tree, but it wasn't made by any animal that anyone knew of. As time went on, stories started coming out from villagers and patrolling officers about strange stuff that was happening in the forest. Apparently, they weren't hearing crickets or birds chirping in the forest anymore. Instead, they could hear drums beating from far off in the jungle. Sometimes they would see a lantern light floating between trees at midnight. And then there was the story from a forest guard named Bat. He was working late one night when he saw the apparition of a headless man walking along the forest path. After a while, the figure walked straight through a wall of fire that had been built by the workers to keep the elephants away. And then he vanished into thin air. Okay, now hold on to your seats because it gets weirder. In 2008, a group of wildlife photographers decided to set up camp near the core of the reserve, close to the old Veerappan trail. They pitched their tent a few hundred meters away from a stream and set up their campfire a good 30 meters back from the tent. Around 2:30 a.m., one of them woke up and he saw a tribal man covered in ash standing still near their fire. He looked normal except for the fact that he was whispering frantically, "You're not supposed to be here. Leave before she comes." He kept repeating this over and over again. The man stood there for 20 minutes just muttering these exact same words over and over again. And then he suddenly turned to look directly at the person who was watching him, and then he vanished. Of course, the photographer assumed that it was a dream until he went outside and found their equipment scattered in the trees. Some were completely destroyed as if they were torn apart by some sort of wild animal. Their audio recorder was knocked to the ground and smashed, and there was a huge gash in their tent. But what was weird was that the wind was calm that night and nothing was damaged except for their camping equipment. And that's when they remembered the old warnings from the locals about setting up camps anywhere near the Whispering Path. But how did that man get out of the camp? Why was he trying to warn them? Who was the woman he warned them about? Were they all in danger? These questions still linger, and to this day no one knows the answer. In another case in 2009, 2 men entered the forest but only one came out. He told officials that they got separated from each other, but it was clear that he was lying. He was sweating profusely and his clothes were torn and dirty, as if he had been running for his life. He kept insisting that his friend just got lost and that he would be fine. But when the rescue team came back empty-handed, they knew that the man was hiding something. They questioned him further and he broke down and told them what really happened. He said that his friend suddenly started acting weird and kept saying strange things like, "We shouldn't be here and she's here." And then he started running into the forest. The man tried to stop him, but he just ran faster and faster until he disappeared into the bushes. When the man came out of the forest, he was alone. The second man's body was never recovered. This story is just one of many. Since the beginning of the 21st century, 8 people have disappeared in Satyamangalam, and 5 bodies have been found mutilated and drained of blood. So what exactly is going on here? Locals believe that the forest is cursed. It is haunted by the souls of those who died in the battles between the smugglers and the police. I mean, it makes sense. The forest is almost impenetrable, and throughout history there have been people who have gone in and never come out. The best example is a forest ranger who disappeared in 2011. He went missing while investigating the death of an endangered elephant, which was found hacked to death in the forest. Was he trying to find whoever did this? Did he get attacked? We don't know because he was never found. However, there is another theory as well. Some believe that the ghost of the forest is the soul of an ancient tribal priestess. She lived in the 19th century and, according to legends, she was brutally murdered by British soldiers in colonial times after she refused to convert to Christianity. Ever since then, her soul has stayed in the forest, wandering aimlessly. She is angry at anyone who enters her land. She takes her anger out on them, either driving them insane or tearing their bodies apart, limb from limb. Maybe the ghost doesn't want the world to forget her. She wants everyone to know that this forest is hers. Some say that the forest itself is alive. It breathes and feels pain. It fights back against anyone who tries to harm its ecosystem. This could explain why the forest seems to be protecting the endangered species. But there's one thing I don't understand. If she's angry at anyone who enters her land, then why did she spare the bandit village? I mean, he literally used her home as his hideout. I guess she only punishes those who she deems unworthy. If you ever travel the Sathiamangalam forest, be sure to stay away from the old Verapin trail and, most importantly, stay away from the Whispering Path. But if you do decide to go there, please do us all a favor and bring a priest. That's all for the night. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.